When the doctor looked into my eyes, I knew he wasn't just about to give me news. He was about to take away the rest of my peace. I still remember that cold Tuesday morning, the kind where the air outside feels heavier than your own breath. The hospital hallway smelled of medicine and bleach, and every step echoed like a countdown. I sat there on the edge of that hard chair, my old fingers clutching my handbag, praying it wasn't as bad as the doctor made it sound. When he finally walked in, his eyes said everything before his mouth did. He sighed, pulled down his glasses, and said softly, "Mrs. Thompson, it's serious. Your heart and lungs are failing faster than we expected. If the new treatment doesn't work, you might not make it through the year." For a second, I thought I hadn't heard him right. The room went silent, no ticking clock, no sound of nurses walking by. Just the heavy thud of my own heartbeat in my ears. I didn't cry. I just sat there, frozen, trying to gather every memory that made my life worth living, my children's laughter, my late husband's smile, the garden I used to tend every morning. Everything flashed before me like a movie I wasn't ready to end. The doctor's voice faded in and out, explaining procedures, medications, hospital visits. But my mind was somewhere else, with my kids. Mary, my eldest, who used to sleep beside me when she had nightmares. Robert, my boy who once refused to eat unless I fed him myself. I thought about calling them right away. I wanted to hear their voices, to feel that comfort again, the kind only family can give. When I got home, the sunset was burning orange through the curtains. I made myself a cup of tea, my hands trembling too much to hold it steady. I dialed Mary first. When she answered, I could hear the television in the background. "Mary," I whispered, "the doctor says it's bad. I might not have much time left." There was silence, a long, heavy one. Then she said, almost too casually, "Oh, Mama, I'm sorry to hear that. I'll see if I can come by next week." Next week? That's all my daughter had to say to me after hearing I might die. I hung up the phone and sat there for hours, staring at the wall. Then I tried Robert. He didn't pick up. Later, he texted, "Got your message, Ma. Stay strong. Stay strong." 2 words. From the same boy who once couldn't sleep without my lullaby. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The medicine on my nightstand glowed under the dim lamp. I whispered, "God, I can fight this. But please don't let me fight it alone." I didn't know then that this disease wouldn't just show me how fragile my body was. It would show me how fragile my children's love had become. They said the house was too big for me. But they forgot it was built with my love, not with bricks. My house isn't just a building, it's my whole life stitched into walls. Every corner still whispers laughter. Every window still remembers. My children's faces pressed against the glass on rainy days. It was here that I learned what love looked like, and sadly, it's here I began to learn what betrayal felt like too. After my diagnosis, I thought my children would spend more time here, maybe bring some life back into this old place. But weeks passed, and the only sound that filled the halls was the slow tick of the clock and the hum of the oxygen machine. Then one afternoon, Robert finally came. My heart leaped. I even baked his favorite pie, even though my hands could barely stir the spoon. When I opened the door, he wasn't smiling. He looked serious, like a man on business. He hugged me, stiffly, and said, "Mama, you shouldn't be living here all alone. This house is too big for you." I laughed nervously. "Too big? Robert, I raised 3 children in this house. It's not too big, it's just quiet now." He looked around, eyes scanning the furniture like he was seeing price tags instead of memories. "You could sell this place, Mama. Get something smaller. Closer to the hospital. It makes sense." Something in his tone made me uneasy. It wasn't care, it was calculation. But I brushed it off. "He's my son," I told myself. "Maybe he just wants what's best." A few days later, Mary stopped by She brought along her husband, Steve, I was happy until he placed a folder on the kitchen table. "Mama," he said, "we've talked about this. It's time to be practical. These are just some papers that could help manage your property in case. Well, if something happens." I froze. The word happens hit me like cold water. "What kind of papers?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. Mary smiled, the kind of smile that hides something sharp. "Don't worry, Mama. It's just for your own good. We just need your signature so everything stays organized." I didn't sign. I told them I'd read it later. That night, I sat by the fire with those papers in my lap. The words blurred together. But I understood enough. It wasn't just about managing, it was about transferring. They were preparing for my death. Like it was already scheduled. Tears fell onto the pages. I whispered, "You're my children. How can you do this to me before I'm even gone?" The next morning, I overheard them outside, their voices low but hurried. "If we don't act now, we'll lose the chance," Steve said. "She's old. She won't notice," Mary replied. My chest tightened. The same children I carried for 9 months, the same ones I fed before I fed myself now, saw me as an opportunity. That night, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the family portraits on the wall. In every photo, they were smiling beside me. And I wondered, are they ever really smiling with me, or just for what they knew would one day be mine? I used to fear dying alone, until I realized being forgotten while alive hurts even more. The days after that conversation felt like years. The house that once echoed with laughter now swallowed every sound. Even the ticking of the clock started to feel louder, almost mocking me with each passing second. I kept hoping someone would visit. Maybe Robert would call, or Mary would text. But the phone stayed silent. Not even a simple, "How are you, Mama?" I started leaving the front door unlocked. Part of me hoped one of them might surprise me, walk in, bring flowers, sit for tea. But no one ever did. The only visitors I got were the morning nurse and the mailman. Meals became smaller because I couldn't finish them. Medicine bottles piled up on the counter like little soldiers guarding my loneliness. And when I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Her shoulders were smaller, her hair thinner, but it was her eyes that hurt me most. They looked empty, like someone who had already said goodbye but was still breathing. Sometimes I'd sit in my late husband's old chair and talk to him. "James," I'd whisper, "you'd know what to do. They don't see me anymore. I'm just a burden now." The silence that followed was heavy, but in that silence, I could almost feel his hand on my shoulder, a warmth I hadn't felt from my children in months. Then one afternoon, the nurse, Angela, came earlier than usual. A young woman with kind eyes and a voice that could calm a storm. She brought soup, sat beside me, and said, "You remind me of my grandma. I lost her last year. She used to tell me stories about her youth. You must have plenty." I smiled faintly. "I do. But no one wants to hear them anymore." Angela reached out, held my wrinkled hand, and said, "Then I do. Tell me one." That one small sentence broke me. I hadn't realized how starved I'd become, not for food, but for care. For a listener. For a soul that saw me as someone, not something. We sat for hours that day. I told her about my garden, the smell of rain on my porch, how my children used to dance in the kitchen while I cooked. She listened like every word mattered. When she left, she smiled and said, "You're not alone, Mrs. Thompson. I'll be back tomorrow." That night, for the first time in months, I slept without tears. But even in that peace, my heart whispered the truth. It shouldn't take a stranger to remind you that you're worth love. I prayed quietly before closing my eyes. "God, if my days are truly numbered, don't let me leave this world bitter. Let me remember the warmth of kindness, even if it didn't come from the ones I gave my life to." And as the night faded into morning light, I realized something painful but freeing. Love doesn't always come from where you planted it. Sometimes, it blooms in the most unexpected hearts. The night I almost died, I saw who really wanted me to live, and who was just waiting for me to stop breathing. It was raining that night, the kind of storm that makes the whole sky tremble. Thunder rolled over the house like angry footsteps, and I could feel each one in my chest. My breathing had gotten worse. Every inhale felt like climbing a hill I no longer had the strength to climb. Angela, my nurse, called the doctor in a hurry. I could hear her voice in the hallway, shaky but determined. "She's fading fast. Doctor, you need to come now." The doctor's voice came through the phone, calm but grave. "Call her family. Tell them to come if they want to say goodbye." I lay there, half conscious, my vision blurred by tears and pain. I wasn't afraid of dying, not anymore. I had made peace with that. What I feared was dying unloved. Dying knowing the people I gave my life to no longer cared. Within an hour, I heard car doors outside. My children had arrived, but their footsteps didn't sound like heartbreak. They sounded hurried, impatient. Mary came in first, with Robert behind her. Neither of them looked at me right away. They whispered to each other near the doorway, their voices sharp and hushed. "Did you bring the documents?" Mary muttered. "Yes," Robert replied. "They're in the car. We'll need her to sign before morning. Once she's gone, we can handle everything without court trouble." They didn't know I could still hear them. Every word stabbed deeper than the pain in my chest. Angela walked in, wiping her eyes. "She can hear you," she said coldly. "This is not the time for that." But they just exchanged glances, the kind that said, "Let her hear. It won't change anything." When the doctor arrived, he checked my pulse and whispered, "She might not make it till dawn." My children stood at the foot of the bed, pretending to cry. I could tell the tears were rehearsed, a performance for the nurse, not for me. Between their fake sobs, I saw Mary glance at the table where my will lay open. And in that moment, something inside me broke, not my body, but my heart. I gathered the little strength I had left and called softly, "Angela." She came close, held my hand. I looked straight at her and said, loud enough for them to hear, "You've been more of a daughter to me than my own." The room went silent. Robert's face flushed red. Mary froze. "You took care of me," I whispered, "not because of what I had, but because of who I was." Angela's tears fell onto my hand. My children didn't move. They just stood there, exposed faces stripped of the masks they wore for years. Lightning flashed through the window, and for a split second, I saw them clearly, not as my children, but as strangers who had once borrowed my love and never returned it. As I closed my eyes that night, one thought echoed in my fading mind. Sometimes, death doesn't reveal who loves you. It reveals who never did. They waited for me to die, but God made them watch me live. When the morning came, sunlight crept softly across my face. I opened my eyes to the sound of birds, faint but real. For a moment, I didn't understand where I was. I thought maybe heaven had gentle mornings too. But then I saw Angela asleep in the chair beside my bed, her hand still holding mine. I was alive. My body ached, but my heart was beating, slowly, stubbornly, beautifully. The doctor came in a few minutes later, shocked. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, smiling, "you made it. You're stronger than any of us imagined." But when my children heard the news, they didn't smile. I saw the look in their eyes, disappointment disguised as concern. Mary muttered, "Thank God," but her tone said otherwise. Robert just stared at the floor. They stayed quiet most of that morning. No hugs, no joy. Just the sound of their restless sighs and the occasional buzz of their phones. When they finally left, Angela turned to me and said softly, "Now you know who's really on your side." That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of pain, but because of clarity. I realized that sometimes, God doesn't save your body just to give you more time. He saves your soul to give you a second chance to choose better. Over the next few weeks, I began to recover. Slowly, gently, like a flower learning to grow again after frost. Angela helped me every day, cooked, cleaned, and laughed with me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt alive. But my children never came back. Not once. Not a call. Not a message. Only silence. And honestly, that silence became my peace. Then one morning, I called my lawyer. I asked him to come over. When he arrived, I handed him the papers my children once tried to make me sign. The ones they said were for my good. I smiled and said, "I'd like to make a few changes." I rewrote my will that day. I left my house, my beautiful, memory-filled home, to a charity that shelters elderly women abandoned by their families. I left a small inheritance to Angela, with a letter that read, "You gave me love when my own blood could not. You reminded me I was still worth care." And for my children, I left only one thing, a note. It said, "You taught me that love without respect is empty. You waited for me to die, but I lived long enough to see your truth. My heart forgives you, but my hands will no longer feed your greed." Weeks later, I sat on my porch, the same porch where I once prayed to die in peace. The sun was setting, golden and soft. And for the first time in years, I felt free. I whispered to the wind, "Thank you, Lord, not for saving my life, but for saving my heart." And as the breeze brushed my cheek, I smiled, because the real miracle wasn't that I survived the sickness, it was that I finally survived them.